Thanks, Chris. I'm Dan Clark with the King County Prosecutor's Office. I'm the Chief Criminal Deputy, and we have David Baker here. And I'll let David introduce himself. David's going to go through the data dashboard just as a demonstration, and then I'll talk to everybody about how our office has used the data dashboard. So I'll turn it over to David. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Hi, everyone. My name is David Baker. I'm a senior deputy prosecutor at the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, and I'm now currently in the role of the data analytics manager. And that means I basically oversee our case management system, the data integrity of everything that goes into the case management system, how our workflow actually work within the case management system, the data that comes out of it, the analysis of it, and then sort of the maintenance and updating of our data dashboard. Just because of some of the questions we heard, I wanted to give you a couple little sort of bits on the background. We moved to an electronic case management system in 2013. That system is called Prosecutor by Karpel. It's put out by a company called Karpel Solutions. They also have versions for the court and defense. We have a population of a little over 2.2 million. We handle about 6,000 felony cases a year and about 6,000 misdemeanor cases. We're a little different than some jurisdictions in that the vast majority of misdemeanors are not handled by our office. The municipalities like the city of Seattle or the various other smaller cities in our jurisdiction handle most of the misdemeanors. We handle all of the felonies. Now, we went through a sort of a journey in getting to our data dashboard. When I first came into my role, we were still collecting data effectively by hand in paper. We'd send out emails once a month, and all the attorneys would have to mark down on a sheet how many filings they did, how many cases they disposed, all those things. And they would collect all that data and then submit that to the supervisors who would tally it up and try and get some sense of the data going on. As I came in, I took us to leveraging the capabilities within our case management system within Prosecutor by Karpel and tools such as Microsoft's Power BI to really give us live insights, live tracking on what's going on with the data, what's accurately being entered, what's not, and really provide us with the data points we needed that we wanted to see in a way that was just not possible before. As that developed, we eventually moved to the point with the urging of our elected Dan Satterberg to publish a public data dashboard, and that resulted in what you're seeing here, this page. And I'll go through it now. We came at this at the idea that we really wanted this to be educational and accessible. So we wanted somebody to be able to come to this with very little understanding of our criminal justice system, and if they put in the time to go through it and to look at the explanations and read it, they could come away with a very good high-level understanding of how the criminal justice system in Washington and King County works, how a case is processed. And to that end, we started with sort of a basic explanation of what's going on, an email for people to contact us, an introductory video, just basically walking people through how to use the dashboard and things they can do with it, a discussion of the guiding principles behind our development, and then really, even at the highest, most basic level, a really, really super high view, simple process of the case. Law enforcement investigates, we receive the referrals and can file charges, and the case goes into court and is processed from there. From there, we have the dashboard itself, which is placed into the website through Microsoft's Power BI. It's a really powerful tool in that regard. And below that, we have a detailed glossary of terms and clarifying information. This goes through and explains everything in here in pretty decent detail. And we tried to use language that was readily understandable by the general public. So you could go in there, okay, what do you mean by an open case? What is a referral? What does it mean that when we decline to file a case? What is, the difference between a jury trial and a bench trial and a plea and a dismissal? We break all of those down. And then we tried to break the dashboard down in sort of a logical way to try and, help people understand that. We start with this section on what our open caseload is. This we really wanted to focus on to begin with because this is one of the huge challenges of our day. With all the impacts of COVID-19 and limitations on court processes and many other issues, our overall caseload as far as open cases just skyrocketed. And that's a really important thing to note and to watch in our system. And then we allow, we set it up so that folks could filter by different kinds of offenses. So they could look at, okay, what's going on with domestic violence offenses? What's going on with murder and homicide offenses? And even things such as what's going on with drug offenses. Now, drug offenses is interesting. You see the big drop here. This comes from a Washington Supreme Court decision in March of 2021 that basically ruled that the Washington felony possession of drugs statute was unconstitutional and applied that unconstitutionality retroactively. So all of those cases got dismissed in a broad way. We also moved into letting people see, okay, well, of all those open felony cases, how many people are actually in custody? And then what are they in custody for? Are they in custody for violent offenses, offenses that have a threat to the safety of persons in the community, criminal history, trying to give them a background of that. And then just sort of the age of the caseload. How old are the cases going on? And then we wanted to provide further sort of details on those basic things that really let people know what's going on. And one of those basic measures for us is felony referrals. How many felony referrals or cases is law enforcement sending us in any given month, in any given year? And you can see, even just looking at this, a sort of remarkable trend that we've seen with a big drop off, actually, in felony referrals that have been coming to us from law enforcement over time, particularly with COVID. And then the next question after that is, what are you doing with those referrals? Are you filing them? Are you declining them? So we have a whole section on declines, cases that we are deciding not to file. How many are those up there, and what of what types and from what agencies? And people can filter through those and look at different explanations and details about what's going on with declines of, for instance, drug cases, if you wanted to see details on that, or if you wanted to see details on a specific police agency in our jurisdiction, or a specific unit. Units in our context are groups of prosecutors that handle a specific kind of cases, like domestic violence or sexual assaults of adults and children, things like that. Then, of course, we have a section for, okay, well, what's going on with filings? How many cases are you filing? What's the different crime types of those? What police agencies? How do you break those down? And lets people really get an understanding of what's going on as far as filings as well. We have a section for dispositions, of course, going through, pleas, jury trials, bench trials, dismissals. And then we have two additional sections at the end that really give people sort of more context and some insight into what we're working on right now. The historical summary is actually data that our King County, our local court, the King County Superior Court, which handles felony prosecutions, provided. And we wanted to do that to give people a historical sense going back 10 years or so about how many felony cases are typically filed per year, and letting them sort that by the different types of, whether it's homicides or robbery or violence, what those different types are. And then finally, we have a section on demographics. This goes through and talks about what the demographic data is and what the limitations are. There are huge limitations on the demographic data we have of both defendants and victims. And so this section allows people to kind of explore that, to see what's going on with the age and gender of defendants, people with cases referred against them, and with victims. And you can see some of the issues we have with victim data. There's a huge portion of race data for victims that's just missing, about 46%. A lot of this we have to rely on law enforcement for, but it gives you a good sense or a picture of what some of the issues we face are. To that end, we partnered with an agency, the Urban Indian Health Institute, to revamp how we're doing that. And we have links to their stuff and selections here. Links to their stuff and a discussion of that work here as well. This, in its sort of total, when you look at all of this and the glossary and clarifying information, really gives people a view into how a case comes into our system, how it's processed, what is done with it, and explains the different types of outcomes and so forth. We're looking at further expansions in the future. We're constantly talking about that and thinking about that. But that's just sort of the initial part of what we're doing. And then there's that other layer of what we're doing, which is how we're using it both internally and then with our external partners and friends. And I want to turn it over to Dan Clark for that. I'm going to switch to PowerPoint.
Thanks, David. So
You have 5 minutes remaining.
Perfect, I can do this. Legendary baseball analyst Vin Scully used to say that most people use data the way that a drunk uses a lamppost, for support and not illumination. And actually, I think you can use it for both with a good data dashboard. And I'm just going to go through 5 examples of how we use data just within the last 2 years and how it's made a difference in our office. What you're seeing here is a series of slides that we showed to our county council when we asked for additional funding because of COVID. And it's one thing to say we've never worked harder than ever. We have 6,000 pending felonies. It's another thing to actually show it in a dashboard. And so that green line is where we should be, what our average is on average caseload. And you can see from the chart, it makes a really powerful statement to show where we were and where we projected to go. The next slide then, if they said, well, that most of that's probably less serious offenses, we're actually able to say, no, actually, most of it's more serious offenses. And the red shows what's happened since COVID. And it just shows you in King County how the more serious offenses have exploded since COVID. And we were able to explain that the King County Council, that we were explaining to them that we needed more funding with COVID funding because a lot more of our cases then were more serious. We've also used it for internal staffing purposes. And I think that this is important as well. When we did get some more resources, how do you deploy that? Well, it was important for us to see how are our cases leaving the system. We anecdotally knew that most of our cases leave by plea. Of course, you all know that as well, to a smaller degree dismissals, and then trials are a small little slice of that pie. But to be able to look at that and say, okay, if we're going to add another deputy, we really need to add another negotiator. That just makes the most sense. We were also able to then look at our, for example, homicide unit, and we can say, look, homicides have grown so much over the last year. We now have 250 pending homicide trials in King County. We really need to take whatever limited resources we have, and we actually doubled our homicide unit because of the data that we were seeing. It wasn't that other crimes were less important, it's just that we were exploding in that area and we needed to deploy our resources differently. You can go to the next slide. We're also able to then run internal data and sort of see, you know, if you ask any unit chair, how's your unit doing? They'll say they've never been busier than ever, right? And they all need more data, and excuse me, they all need more resources. How do you then differentiate? You can't just take their word for it. You actually have to run the numbers and figure out their active cases, their active defendants, their total number of cases, and then make strategic decisions based on the data. We also used our data with our criminal justice partners, the courts and law enforcement. So for the courts, we wanted to highlight for them that they made a rule change called 3.4, which is not relevant here, but we wanted to analyze the effect of that rule change on our data. And we were able to show that, in fact, where they thought they were helping, they were actually hurting. We're able to take this data to the courts and show that what they're doing is actually exacerbating some of the problems. Not something judges like to admit on their own, but really can't ignore once the data is there. We also use it with police. We were able to say, they're saying, hey, you're not filing our cases. And we say, look at this, your referrals have dropped significantly. And so they say, oh, okay, that's interesting. And well, maybe that's because of our police staffing, or maybe a myriad of other issues. Or when they took the special assault detective out of their police and put them back on the streets, guess what? Special assault cases plummeted because they weren't able to work them up and send them to our office. And we were to say, this is the effect of doing that. You know, you're in charge of your own resources, but this is the consequence. Our special assault cases are plummeting because of it.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Cool, I can do that. All right, so with our external partners, we also use our data. So when our special assault unit is working with CaseArc, which is an advocacy group, and they want to know what's happening to their cases, we can say, this is what's happening to your cases. It's taking this long to get to trial. And the reason is, you know, all these other factors. Or with the next would be like community groups that we're partnering with on the race data. I don't mind people criticizing our office. I just want them to actually have the right data when they do it. And so this actually provides people the data to criticize our office and have robust discussions. And that's when we partnered with UIHI to collect some of that important data on race and ethnicity. And then finally, we've used data in developing new programs. We want to work on a diversion program, and we want to look at the population in there. who in our system has no prior felonies, who has prior adult felonies, who has prior juvenile felonies, who has both. And we can say, hey, look at that green piece. What if we could take those folks who have no prior felonies and offer some diversion program to them? Maybe it'll keep them out of the rest of the system. And so that's how we've been developing some of our programs, and we can look at the potential impact of an idea and play it out and say, hey, this is actually going to affect 36% of our population if we use this program versus that program. So all in all, we found a number of ways to use our data, both internally and externally. And when you own the data and you have the best data in the system, then all of a sudden the courts are looking to you, the defense attorneys are looking to you, the public is looking to you, your data is relied upon, and real changes can be made because of it. I want to thank David Baker for developing our data dashboard. It is really revolutionary and has really helped define our issues so well, both internally and externally.